Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fetch Quest podcast, where we talk about video games and more. Today, I am your host, Guy, joined by my fellow co-host, Logan Brewer.
Hey everybody, how have you been lately, Guy?
I'm pretty good, man. Just chilling, relaxing. Being a college student. But there's something I've realized that I've had recently, and it's an obsession with characters with big, big swords.
Oh really, Guy? I couldn't tell man who was dressed up as Guts Berserk for a convention.
Dude, I like Guts. I like Ichigo. I like Ike. Dude, I like my avatar that looks like Guts. I just like him, dude.
I think you're forgetting a big one.
A big sword or a big person?
It's Cloud, you idiot. Big sword and big hair.
Dude, you're right. How could I forget him? Oh, that perfectly transitions into today's topic. We are going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII. What is it? What is it about? Do we love it? Do we hate it? All in this video. So, let's talk about Final Fantasy VII, Brewer. You just finished it recently.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say well, it definitely has some issues. I think majority of them just come from the time the game was made and the technology at the time. Because other than the issues I had with that, like some, grinding and stuff, like honestly, I didn't really have any issues with the game. It deserves being called a landmark JRPG by so many people. It's stood the test of time.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Um, Final Fantasy VII is also one of my favorite games ever. I do think it is extremely dated, the original version, but if you go into it with an open mind, I think it's one of the best games ever made. But before we get into all that, let's talk about what it is exactly. Final Fantasy VII is a JRPG developed by Square Enix, published in 1997 on the PlayStation 1. It stars Cloud Strife and his other party members as they go on a world-spanning journey to stop a villain named Sephiroth. You might have recognized some of those names, because these are some of the most iconic names in all of video games.
Yeah, since the Final Fantasy series has always been pretty big, but Final Fantasy VII is probably the most iconic game in the series, if we're gonna be honest.
Yeah,
Because
no, it's
it
definitely had
gets
the most
mentioned in
impact.
everything. I mean, hell, it's the one that got a character in Smash Bros. Actually, two characters.
Two characters. Yeah, I was about to say two characters. Um, I mean, like, if we talk about it, it's, to be honest, it's kind of fair, because it was the first Final Fantasy game that was ported, like, that was on 3D.
Well, it's the first one that was also not on a Nintendo system. Because for a while it was releasing on the NES and then the Super Nintendo. But then after 7 was released on the PlayStation because the Nintendo 64 with its cartridges couldn't hold all the memory needed for the game, whereas the PlayStation's disc could hold a lot more memory. Which even then, you still need a multiple disc to play the game on the original PlayStation. You needed 3 damn disc. That's how big the game was for the time.
Yeah, so, like, for reference, the game is about, like, 3.5 gigabytes in terms of size, which isn't big in today's world, where we have games that are, like, 130 gigabytes. Mortal Kombat 1.
Your
It's
average Call of
still
Duty patch being 50 gigabytes.
true. It was really big for the time, especially for, like, on the PlayStation 1, which didn't have as much storage space as compared to a PS5 or Xbox, or a PC even. But it's really interesting because that was one of the first games to ever do multiple disc for storage reasons.
I don't know if it was one of the first, since a lot of games had to do that. Because even with the disc expansion being a lot better than cartridges, it still
Yeah,
was fairly limited at the time. But it was still an
or at
impressive feat
least,
of
yeah,
3 disc.
or at least, or at least like to word this better. One of the most popular old games that used multiple disc for storage.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially because again, it wasn't just 2; it was 3.
It was
They went
three
the extra
fucking discs.
mile.
And the game is huge, which, to be fair, like, it's a game that came out well over 20 years ago, and there's a lot in that game. Like, I would say if you're going for a completionist run, that's probably 80 hours of your life that you that you need to put into the game, which is a lot.
If you're playing the original version, yeah, definitely. Like the newer versions have like a couple features like speed up and stuff, which can make like grinding at the end easier, especially if you want to fight like the super bosses. But if you're playing it with like out those features, especially like without any guides to help you, yeah, you're gonna be there for a while.
Yes, 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 yes.
Because
That's actually something I want to. Yeah,
I was
you
about to
first.
say, because like as much as I loved the game and playing through it, I will say I did have to use a guide a fair amount of times just for like where the hell to go. Just
That
because
is fair.
I think back then when you had more time to like be looking around the map, even with the high encounter rate. Well, actually, it wasn't that high, surprisingly. But I mean, random encounters still kind of suck. That's besides the point. But there are plenty of times it's like, okay, you need to do this. I'm like, okay, how do I do that? I try it for like an hour. I'm like, okay, fuck this. I look online. It's like, okay, this stupid harp that I need to get into this area is buried in this one specific spot. How the hell was I supposed to know that?
No, I completely get that, but like you said, it's just a byproduct of its time. It's not really the game itself.
Yeah, if ever got like a proper remake and not whatever the hell we're getting now, just a remake of the original story and gameplay, I think it'd probably be one of the best JRPGs of all time. Well, it still is, but I mean, it'd be a damn near perfect one.
True. That's something I actually kind of get into is the gameplay. So the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII is turn-based. So obviously, you take turns to take your actions. But the thing about it is that this and other Final Fantasies share is that it runs on a time meter. So essentially, you have to wait for a meter to fill all the way up, which is representative of time, for you to act. And not only do your characters act off this, but also the enemies. So not only do you have to be able to manage your actions with the time meter, but it's not like traditional turn based in the sense of, oh, you do your turns and then wait on the enemy. No, if your enemy's time meter is really fast, they can go twice in a row.
Yeah, well, like one thing I like to do in the game is like with the materia, which is another system we'll get into, which is really fun. I used a time materia to get a couple spells that let me speed up or slow down time. So I sped up time on my characters and would slow down the enemy's time, and then I could just like hit them 3 times before they could even touch me.
Which is awesome. But that's just one of the main systems of the game. So not only do you need to think methodically, but you need to think relatively quick on your feet, which creates a really fun gameplay loop where you're always on your feet trying to figure out what's the best course of action to approach this battle while also keeping a cool and level head so you don't mess up.
Yeah. Then I think there's other little factors into the game too, like limit skills. Like let's say your character gets hit for a lot of damage, so their limit builds up and they can do a limit attack. Maybe that can be just enough to kill the enemy. Limit attacks usually come out almost instantaneously, where the other spells, if the enemy is like trying to cast something, they'll cast first and then you'll go after. But if you got a limit skill, you can move before them instantaneously. So there's a lot of strategy involved in like, should I wait to do this, or how much time left until I can put some heals on my guys so they can survive. It's just
Yeah.
a lot of strategy, and it keeps you really engaged too, so the battles don't get too boring and repetitive.
Yeah, the limits, they work like ultimates, essentially, like where another meter also builds up, but it builds up when you do damage and when you take damage, mostly from taking damage. That's the big one.
Yeah, doing damage doesn't really build up all that quick, but like the taking damage, like enemy will knock out half of your health, you'll usually build that limit up real damn quick.
Very, very quick. But going into the other part of the gameplay system, which you mentioned earlier, which, in my opinion, makes the gameplay some of the best turn-based combat in the fucking business, is the materia system.
Dude, it's so
Holy
fun the ways you
shit,
can
it is
just
so fucking good.
customize your characters to like make a bunch of fun different loadouts.
So yeah, let's explain like what materia is. So you know how in usually your JRPGs and your other RPGs, usually your characters are pretty set in stone and like the certain classes you have to make them in. So like, what's a really good example?
You got
Oh,
healers, warriors, wizards, and then like
yeah.
thief, other random classes too.
Yeah, and some RPGs that you're locked into that class and you can't really like customize from there. Final Fantasy VII takes that concept, dabbles in it with only like a little hint of it, but as far as it can tell, it says go free reign on how you want to play this game, and I think that is incredible. So to elaborate what we're talking about, is materia is they're equiptables that all of your characters can have equipped, which they let you have access to healing spells, damaging spells, buffs, debuffs, summons, etc. Even passive abilities like being able to attack twice in one turn.
Yep.
All is controlled by materia. Now, what's perfect about the materia system is that any character can have any materia. So if you build Cloud to be like a strong melee attacker, you can also have him put on Thundaga or the Thunder materia or the Quake materia so that he can do thunder damage with magic and Quake damage with magic. There's
Yeah.
so many ways to mix match your characters with different abilities and builds that it makes a lot of replays very, very different from the last.
Yeah, it's like what I like doing like with my party is like Cloud. I usually gave some HP up materia to like make his HP a lot higher than my party's, and then gave him a cover materia to like protect my other party members, and then a counter attack materia so that whenever he got hit, he would attack back. So a lot of times, like without me even pressing a button, enemies would try to attack. Cloud would block, usually tank it pretty good, and then like beat the shit out of the other enemies. And like that's just a
That's
really
awesome.
simple example of something you can do with the materia system. It's like there are really complicated setups later game to make your
Yeah,
characters just do absurd damage.
there are there's so many different like cool materia too. Like all the summon materia, which I think is awesome. They have like different effects and they have different summons that do different things. But there's some materia that just break the game sometimes, which I think is awesome. Uh, like there's two materia in particular that I'm thinking about with that. It's the enemy. I forget what it's called, but it's like you
Enemy
essentially
skill?
copy
Yeah, enemy
enemy
skill,
skill.
enemy
Yes,
skill.
enemy skill and mime.
Well, mine's a bit of one later down the line, but enemy skill is something you get very early on, and it's like probably one of the most helpful materials you can get out there because if an enemy hits you with a certain attack that's in a database and your character has that materia on, that materia will learn that attack and you can use that attack at any time, which
Which is
gives me
really
some like
yeah.
really good effects because like the materia system, it's very customizable, but they balance it by like, oh, if you put like too much electric or ground materia on your guy, he's going to be losing a lot more health, so he may like be a bit more of a glass cannon. But like if I want like Barrett, what I did because he didn't have as many materia slots, I focused him on being a healer. But to give him a variety of attacks, I made sure one of his materia slots had enemy skill in it, so he could use a variety of magic without having the penalty and without having to take up a bunch of my other slots that I needed for healing.
And see, that works. And they balance the game around that so much. And all the party members are viable in their sense. And the only real. What makes it even better is that I think the only real difference between each character is some of the stat spreads and their limits.
Yeah. I think the biggest one is the limits because like the stat spreads you're never really going to notice too much unless you're like really looking at them stats. That and like
Yeah.
maybe the weapons because some of the characters are like better like in the back line, so like fighting from farther back because they can still do as much damage from back there, but the enemies won't hit as hard. Whereas some of the
Yeah.
characters like Cloud, they have to fight in the front line to deal effective damage or to even hit the enemy properly.
Yeah, that's a big one. Like well, what's a good example? Aerith, she compared to the other party members, she has the highest magic skill in the entire of the entire party. But that doesn't really matter because you can build her to be like a healer or a buffer, and then you could have someone like Cloud be like a magic user. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the game allows for a lot of customization in that fact. So that is something that Brewer brings up. That is a good point. Is that the weapons do provide like a bit of uniqueness in how like they could be played, but you can also play to the strengths or the weaknesses of that character's weapon. I don't know, there's just so much you can do with that
Yeah.
game. It's crazy.
Like an example for me, like I said, some characters have long range. Like Barrett, he had a gun, so you could like usually always attack from front or back. I gave him like a long range materia, so his attack would be the same no matter what he was at, and a couple others to like really make him good for the back line, so he could heal my party while also not being having a risk of like taking too much damage, just because he was in the back line where you don't take as much. And then even if he did nearly get hit, Cloud was using the cover materia I mentioned before to protect him, hit back more, and then just repeat the process of like spamming heals.
God,
And
yeah,
then
dude, that's a good strategy.
yeah, then even like there's other simpler strategies too, like that almost everyone uses. Like the most popular and like I'd say probably most useful materia pairing is like the all materia, because it combines with any magic materia you have to give the all effect. So like let's say you had a fire materia, right? That would always attack one enemy. But if you put an all materia on it, it would attack all the enemies with that fire magic. Healing magic heals one person, heals all people, so on and so forth. But they balanced that out too by like materia levels. So like the all materia at level 1, it can only be used one time, and then it's going to revert back to just healing one person instead of everyone. But as you level it up more, you can use that more times. So it's just
And that's
it's a really rewarding system.
It really is. And the thing is that the game also rewards you for like keeping with that materia and leveling it up because you unlock more skills and more stuff about it. And eventually, when you upgrade a materia to its max, what'll happen is that the materia will make a duplicate of itself, a level 1 version of itself. So you can upgrade that one again and keep getting more and more materias.
Yeah, which for some of the materials in the game, they can be really hard to find, or that's like the only way you can get duplicates of. So it is pretty rewarding. Like you get all the points you need to level up the materia, and you get an extra one. So now you can like put that on another party member, or put it on the same party member for like an even better effect. There's just so many different ways you can work with the materia system in your favor.
I will use Knights of the Round to deal massive damage. And then again, with Tifa, I will use Knights of the Round to do massive damage. From there, I will use the Mime skill on on Barrett to use Knights of the Round again to do massive damage.
Can Knights of the Round even like get a second materia when it like gets master level?
I don't know. I think the summons can be duplicated. I don't know though.
I think the only
haven't
one
gone that far.
the only one that I know can't be duplicated, or I think I know, is like the HP up, those types of materia, because like I've leveled a bunch of those to max and it didn't give me a new one. I'm assuming Knights of the Round,
Gotcha.
Knights of the Round has like a couple special like things put in it that other summons don't, just because of how busted it is. Like there's one materia called like Quadra Magic, which when paired with magic or even summons, will let your character use that materia 4 times in a row. So you can imagine with like summons, the most like busted magic in the game, or most powerful, it can get pretty insane. It's like Sephiroth, when I went up to him, I made him my damn bitch, because like I used Bahamut's Zero, like the second most powerful summon in the game, with Quadra Magic, hit him 4 times with that, hit him with Knights of the Round right after, and then just to top it off, I used a Mime Materia, which copies the action of a previous party member, to use Knights of the Round again.
Christ.
Man stood no chance against me.
That's awesome though. But like that's the thing about Final Fantasy VII is that like Brewer used summons to fight the final boss. Meanwhile, I used like a defensive playstyle of reflect up, haste, and I would just passively heal myself while doing like normal attacks. Like I was focusing defense over offense. But that's the thing, is that they're both equally viable just because of how the game is built, which is awesome.
Yeah, since you can like
God.
build your character around too, like summons are pretty powerful, but I think like there's builds that can let you get up to like 1,000,000 damage off of straight up just limits and repeat with Cloud's final limit.
Dude, there's so many ways to like build your characters around like high damage or like high defense and whatnot. I truly think that the gameplay is one of a kind, and unfortunately, like Square Enix has not really replicated it as of recent. But that's for a later topic. You mentioned Sephiroth earlier. I think that's a great spot to transition into the story and what is the game about.
That Final Fantasy VII is definitely a lot of things, because like if you just explain any singular part of the story itself, it's gonna be kind of a confusing mess. I think just because it's a little confusing in a first playthrough. But the reason why so many people get attached to the characters and love the story is because how it all comes together eventually. That's my opinion, at least.
Do you think the story is very like, I'm not going to say convoluted because I did understand it, but there's a lot to it, but I do think the story is great overall.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help that the translation for the original is a bit messed up, even in the re-release.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, one of the main characters' names, even that, still has a mistranslation in it from the original.
Hashtag Eris, not my girl.
Aerith versus Eris, the battle of all time.
I can't believe that is still like a debate.
Well, I
it's
mean,
a losing
I can
debate.
Get it, because if you grew up with the game and calling her Eris the entire time while not knowing that's a mistranslation, it's kind of hard to not get attached to that name when you've been saying it your whole life.
That's fair. But I guess if we can give like a basic rundown of the game, I'm not going to say much because this game is so much more than what I'm about to describe.
Well,
but
we'll
essentially
have a spoiler
the opening
section later, so
yeah. The beginning of the game starts with our main character Cloud Strife on a train about to help these eco-terrorists. What are they called again, Brewer?
Avalanche.
Avalanche, yes.
They're eco-terrorist slash rebel group, because like it's kind of a moral gray area. The game always does make that very clear, to where you're trying to do something to fight back against the big corporation Shinra, which is killing the planet. You know, same way China's killing it with pollution and stuff. Well, almost every country's killing our planet with pollution, but
yeah,
you know, big ones.
but yeah, going on with that, Cloud is helping this group called Avalanche take down one of the reactors in the city of Midgar, the biggest city in the world and the capital of Shinra's headquarters, which is a company that is trying to use the materia and the energy of the planet called Gaia to fuel their machines and their society. But the problem is that the planet itself is like a living being, and by concentrating and harvesting this energy, they're essentially killing the planet slowly over time. So the idea is that these characters are going on this mission to take down Avalanche, and it goes so many different ways from here. That is all I'll say. But essentially, our main character Cloud, he's kind of a loner type who he isn't very social with people, but he's kind of a mercenary, getting money where he can. He has a childhood best friend named Tifa, who, for some fucking reason, was the #1 most searched character of 2023. I wonder why. Who is very optimistic and cheerful when Cloud is able to help when he can. Barrett, who's a mean and gruff guy who has a soft heart. And many characters from there that you'll keep going. But what sounds like a game about just a rebel organization trying to take over, not trying to take over, but trying to overthrow, like, corporations and like anti-capitalism, turns into a fucking game about identity problems and people trying to find their place in the world. And I'm not going to say how it gets to that, but holy shit, it is incredible.
Yeah, because like beginning of the game is like, let's blow up this reactor because fuck Walmart Corporation, yeah. And then it comes to we're fighting God to save the world from being hit by a meteor.
Like, it's crazy. Like, the game starts off with, like, it starts like an action movie. It's like, oh man, we're on this train and we're, fighting soldiers. And then it turns into, what is my life? What is my meaning by like 30 hours in? It's crazy.
Who is
But
Cloud?
I think this is a good section to talk about like the differences in nowadays, because everything that we've been referring up to this point has been the original of Final Fantasy VII. So, what do you think? Should we talk about the newer games and the current state of the game, or what?
That's a really weird thing because it's weird because like the section we just mentioned, like Midgard, that's the beginning of the game, and it's
6 hours.
a really great intro. It gets you captivated into the story. It has a
Six
lot of great
hours.
action sequences, and yeah,
It's
it
6
takes
hours long.
5 hours long. Well, 5 to 6 hours depending on how long you take with it, but around 5 to 6 hours. But let's go to Final Fantasy VII Remake, where
Oh
that first
Lord.
section of the game, for something called a remake, is 30 hours. Like, what the hell?
I have this beef with Final Fantasy VII Remake, and they call it a remake, but it's just the Midgar section of the game. But they kind of, how do I put it? They add a lot of fluff in there. Let's just say that. The original section of Midgar was a 5 hour long section. As Brewer was saying, great intro, introduces you to all the mechanics and like the main concept of the game and like what the story's going to be like. But turn a very tightly paced intro sequence into a 30-hour JRPG. That doesn't sound too fun.
I mean, I'm all for like giving characters some more background and then just like expanding upon things some where it couldn't be done in the original. Because like, you know what, hey, make a great game even better. But I mean, for a remake, people were waiting like I think fucking over a decade for. It's
Probably.
split up into 3 parts. That first part is just 5 hours of the original game, and it's like very much like loaded through. Like there's good bits here and there, like hey, this character gets to see a little more, or there's more depth, I guess. But then there's dumb shit like, hey, the villain that never showed up in this section, the main antagonist of Final Fantasy VII, that they waited for a long time to reveal for like that sweet moment where he would just have a jaw-dropping performance or just entrance. Let's just show him everywhere in the damn game in that 30 hours, in a stretch 30 hours for Lord knows whatever reason Nomura came up with.
I mentioned this in our villains episode, which you should watch, by the way, if you haven't already. But I do think that Sephiroth as a villain in the modern day has kind of been ruined, and he's kind of a bastardization of what he is currently. So, Final Fantasy VII established Sephiroth as one of the greatest villains in all of gaming. He does something that is horrific midway through the game that a lot of people have been emotionally touched by. He has an incredible entrance, an incredible performance. He's built up to be this big bad. But they do the method of less is more. Sephiroth, as himself, is not in Final Fantasy VII that much.
Which is very surprising.
Yeah, like most of what we get that looks or is Sephiroth is either flashbacks or an illusion. I'm not going to say why, but the point that I'm trying to make is that Sephiroth is very intimidating because you hear so much about him, and you see like the horrors that he's committed, or at least the aftermath of it. There's a section after the Midgar section of the game, which is like, again, like the first 5 to 6 hours, where you have to travel across a lake, to fight something called the Midgar Serpent. This is a very, very hard enemy at this point in the game. It's like level 35, and you should be around level 9 or 10 at this point. It's very hard. You're most likely not going to be able to fight it and beat it. So you have to tame a chocobo so you can ride over the lake safely without getting hit by the Midgar Serpent. Okay, cool. You just went out of your way to get the chocobo, and now you cross the lake to continue the game. Cool. Immediately, once you enter the area that you're supposed to go into, you see a Midgar Serpent hung on a tree, dead.
Well, not just hung, it's like fucking spiked through the head.
And it's caused by Sephiroth.
Yeah, like that massive snake that one-shot you and that you couldn't even put a dent in. That motherfucker not only killed it, but he like put that thing on a pike to display for the world to see.
He obliterated it. And at this point of the game, you're not strong enough to deal with foes like this. So to have someone that you were eventually going to go up against be that strong sets up, I think, the perfect tone for Sephiroth. And it's like that throughout the entire game. But my main issue with the current iteration of Sephiroth is how he's portrayed, because this is something I think the Final Fantasy VII Remake does way too much of, and they shouldn't really have. Sephiroth is everywhere. He
has no life. He's like, hey Cloud, hey honey.
When Cloud is by himself for 10 seconds, they will try to flash like a 3-second snippet of Sephiroth being like, Cloud, I will never be a memory.
Cloud, Advent Children, watch that movie, even though it sucks ass.
Oh god, yeah, we should talk about Advent Children.
Cloud, I made you a sandwich. I hope you like it. I put an extra bologna this time.
But just to conclude the Final Fantasy Remake part, I think it's a good game. I really do, but it definitely has some issues. And frankly, I would prefer if Square Enix were to make a faithful original, because they're trying to redo the Final Fantasy VII story. The big thing in particular is that they hinted at a character's death in the original game not going to be happening in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Not just that, but a character who was canonically dead in the original Final Fantasy VII, they are alive in Rebirth, so they're completely changing up the plot. So people are going to be playing this new remake series thinking that this is how the story is supposed to go.
Well, actually, I think it's 2 characters. One of them is like confirmed alive even though they were dead. The other one, since Rebirth hasn't come out yet, is probably going to be alive because fucking Tetsuya Nomura's writing can't allow for any of the sad things to happen.
Oh yeah, Brewer, explain the donkey bit about there can't be any sadness.
I don't know if I want to get into that too much, because like with the original Final Fantasy VII, like we were mentioning, a lot of the great moments from that just feel like, I don't know, just like less impactful for the remake, or will be less impactful from here on. Like Sephiroth, like we were mentioning, didn't show up in Midgar at all, and you were savoring the moment you could see him. Like when you saw the backstory with him and Cloud, he was with you in the party, but he's not someone you could control. He was of his own will, and you were level 1. You were a bitch baby boy. Sephiroth was like probably level 99, stupid high level. He was one-shotting the enemies that were one-shotting you. He was using some of the strongest magic in the game that you were nowhere close to getting yet with your materia. He was just a force of nature, and you just were there witnessing him. And it was a great way to reveal him until he eventually goes apeshit, burns a damn village down. And then you go to Remake, the dude's got no life. He's always just being like, Cloud, Advent Children was a movie. Cloud, what's up? You want to go to the roller park later? Cloud,
Jesus.
Let's play Smash Bros together. I got a Nintendo Switch recently. He's just always fucking there for some reason. even though we shouldn't be.
It really is. I think this is a good transition to a spoiler section of our video. We're going to be talking about the ending of the game, and we're going to be talking about the impact of that ending. So if you want to skip ahead, go to here. But
yeah, that or just end of the video, because that'll probably be where it is. Either way, this is some of the most impactful stuff in the game, and it's probably like some of the best storytelling you'll find in a video game. Like, it's flawed, definitely, but its overarching story is very loved for a reason. So please do not spoil yourself on it and go play the game.
Okay, so the ending of the game. Sephiroth goes God mode, and you are a little tiny little boy who has to beat him, and then mental battle. What do we think of that? And Aerith gets deadited because because Sephiroth is down there and it's quirky.
Yeah, I think Final Fantasy VII, like, it's remembered for like those big moments that they really built up to. Like, first one with Aerith. This is a party member you got to know for like a really long portion in the game. She isn't someone like Jessie in Remake, which you talk to for a couple hours, then they get off and you're like, oh no, Jessie died, whatever shall I do? No, Aerith, she makes a genuine bond with Cloud. She gets through his dumb, oh, I'm edgy facade. She does a lot of cool stuff with the party, and she has a really cool backstory as well. And this one's my opinion. I think she's purposely made to like to the point where like you want to have her in your party, because like we were mentioning with how you build your characters, everyone is about the same other than stats and limits. Aerith, her limits, instead of being designed around damage, is usually just healing, buff, support the party. She's a very helpful party member to have around. Like, I think going blind into the game, almost anyone would put Aerith on a party just because there's like, hey, she has all these helpful spells, she's easy to use, I'm gonna use Aerith. And then you make that genuine bond with her, and then she goes, after you go apeshit yourself, she goes off to try and fix everything. When you eventually find her, she's praying at an altar, and then that motherfucker Sephiroth comes down and plunges his sword into her chest. And you just have to watch as someone you bonded with through the game up to that point is just dead. They're gone.
Yeah, it's a really impactful moment, which I hate to say it, it is the biggest spoiler in all of video games. Which
almost
it's
everyone knows it at this point.
Yeah, but it's crazy because I knew going into it, like, what was going to happen, especially that scene. Like, I recognize that scenery, but I don't know, man, I cried. I really did. Like you were saying, the game did such an excellent job of building this character and who she was, and like wanting you to have her in your party, but for them to just take that away and never give it back is just crazy.
Yeah, because again, she wasn't some two-note character. She was like a person with like very versed emotions. You think she's just like this cool, nice girl, but she's also the one that's putting on like one of the hottest outfits on when you go into a certain section in the game. She's just really
best
she's
section
cool.
of the game.
Yeah, best section of the game. Cloud cross dresses.
But
yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy because that scene really left an impact on gamers, and that was really the first time like that was done for a big popular game that like, oh, this party member's dead permanently. Like, you can't get her back. Ever.
Yeah. Dude, it affected people so much back that day that like there were forums on like ways to get Aerith back. Like, people were gaslighting themselves into thinking they could get Aerith back by getting a Game Shark or something.
Dude, honestly, like, the getting Aerith back shit was not as big, but I know it was close to the, like, Mew under the truck shit.
Seriously, people were going to a whole nother level to get Aerith back.
They were, and it was crazy. But
Um,
I don't know. That's such a good part of the game. But one thing I also want to talk about is I guess one thing that this is more so speculation, but I think a reason to why Final Fantasy VII kind of like made people see the potential of storytelling in video games is Cloud's character
dude,
and
Cloud
like
is such a
how he
good character.
dude, he's one of my favorite video game protagonists. I think in terms of video game protagonist, I think number one is Kratos, and then number two is probably Cloud. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes, it's like Cloud going in. I didn't expect him to be nearly as well written as I did because I expect him to just be like, edgy sword man is like just really angry for some reason.
Dude,
He's
he's
got
not
the
even edgy. That's the thing. He's just built up like that because of his identity issues.
yeah, because
He's a
throughout the entire
yeah.
game, like they've always shown little inconsistencies, but you kind of just brush them off. But then, like I said with Sephiroth, they have this grand reveal at one moment that the Cloud is like almost a complete lie of a character. It's like the entire game he's saying like, "Oh yeah, I was a part of Soldier. I was first class. I was such a badass." But then you get the reveal later on. Oh no, he wasn't in Soldier. He never made it. He sucked dick. He failed all the tests. His friend Zach made it in. That was cool, but he didn't. He was trying to impress some
He
girl.
tried
He
to
couldn't
build
even
him.
do that.
He tried to build himself up, and it got to a point where not only was he disappointed in himself, but he was afraid that the people around him would be disappointed. So when he returned to Niflheim, he never even revealed himself to be one of the soldiers in the thing. I know it's also pretty confusing if you're reading this for the first time. Uh, there's a program called Soldier which Cloud wanted to get into, but there are enemies called Shinra soldiers, which Cloud was one at one point. It's confusing, but it makes sense.
Goddamn translation.
Let's just
But
say you got the Marines and then you got the Army. Cloud wanted to be in the Marines, but he was only basic cannon fodder, so he was put in the Army. Also, to
pretty
anyone
much.
serving, I meant that as a joke. Please don't kill me. I respect you all. Or maybe
But,
Navy SEALs would be a better analogy. I don't know. You got your
no.
basic grunts, and then you had top class. Cloud wasn't top class. He wanted to impress a girl in his neighborhood. He went to go to Soldier to try to do that. He couldn't do it.
True. But God, Cloud is. I think he's the main reason to why Final Fantasy VII is still really talked about today. Because when you think about Final Fantasy VII, like who do you think of the most and why? It's Cloud.
Yeah, since he's a character I think a lot of people can relate to, because, like I said, he wasn't that special person. He wasn't top class. He was a failure, if anything. Like, he got his butt kicked, and then eventually, poor dude even got experimented on.
To the point where his
Dude.
memories were just mixed up until he was saved
Yeah.
by like the actual top class soldier.
It's crazy because he tried to be someone he isn't, and that's his entire arc in the video game. Is that like he's trying to find who he is, and it's so sad because he will go through any lengths to to do it. Like, do you remember when the party first got to the North Pole, and Hojo was there explaining like the whole Sephiroth clone shenanigans and saying how Cloud was a quote unquote Sephiroth clone? He really isn't, but he was so like distraught by it. He was like, Hojo,
Please give me a
let me
number.
be a clone. Like, give me purpose, because like, what am I doing here? What is my reason? Dude, that hit me so hard.
Yeah, because I think him being a failure that never was able to reach those heights, when he eventually at the end of the game was able to reach them, I think that's what makes him such an inspirational character. Like, dude, even the random like side character in the airship, once he heard Cloud's story, even he was moved. That's how good his story was.
And it's awesome. But yeah, do you want to conclude the spoiler section here?
There is one more thing I want to mention, which relates
Go
to
for it.
Cloud and Sephiroth, because
Cloud is like, he has some of the cells that like Sephiroth has, so he's like a partial clone, which means Sephiroth was able to fuck with him for a lot of the game. make him see
Yeah.
shit, and then also control him. At the end of the fight with Sephiroth, when you eventually do beat him, or you think you do, you start to walk away, but then you have like a really bad, let's say, headache, I guess, or a migraine that you were having throughout the rest of the game. And then Sephiroth is here to fuck with you again. And what I love about this moment is, like, Cloud obviously is fucking pissed because he finally fucking killed this dude after, like, getting his whole party rallied up and everything for the fight to end it all. And then Sephiroth is about to fuck with him again. So as he's standing off with Sephiroth, who is shirtless for some reason, you can see the limit gauge is building up, which it only builds up when you attack, or more importantly, you take damage. So I see the limit building at the end as, like, him finally just getting done with Sephiroth's shit, it building up. And then eventually he unleashes, like, the best limit in the game, Omni Slash on Sephiroth, and just decimates the dude.
That's got to be one of the rawest moments and, like, one of the rawest fucking finales of any video game. I'm not even gonna lie.
Dude, it's so iconic too. Like, dude, even shirtless Sephiroth, which showed up for like literally a minute, was in fucking Smash Bros. As a skin. That's how iconic it was.
Iconic that art is. Dude, it's so raw too, because, like, literally Cloud, his arc is complete. He just has to beat out the rest of that shit. You know what I mean?
Well, plus it's such a cool attack. Like, with the new technology they have with the PlayStation, like, a lot of the summons and limits looked really good. Omni Slash is so cool because he does all these hits with his sword shining, and then he does one final hit at the end. It's so fucking cool, especially being done to Sephiroth.
Exactly. And then the game ends, credits. It's so good. Yeah.
Well, funnily enough, in my case,
because apparently you should be mashing A when that happens. He attacked me, I attacked him back, and then he died. So I had to refight Sephiroth to see that scene.
Wait, what happened? I've never known this. Like, what happened?
I don't know. It's like a really weird. I'm assuming it's a bug. Like, I think it's maybe because I had counter materia on. But for some reason, even if you don't have Omni Slash unlocked, they'll give it to you. But if there's a chance that when you go to attack him, he's just going to attack you first. You'll counter even if you don't have that materia on, and then he just dies from that tiny baby hit, which is a little anticlimactic.
Does the game end or no?
Yeah, the game ends. You get the regular death scene for Sephiroth, which feels really out of place. Like, when he does the Omni Slash, it feels right, because Cloud unleashes this, like, gigantic flurry of attacks on the dude. But then, when that happens, he does one little baby hit, and Sephiroth is like, no!
That's kind of funny, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good place to stop, to conclude the spoiler section.
Yeah.
So, people shall be returning now. So, now that we're getting to this point, Brewer, dude, there's so much to talk about this game. I can go on for hours, but I think it is time for us to conclude a little bit. So, what are some final points you got for Final Fantasy VII, man? Like, or, like, not only the game, but as a series, if you want.
I'm gonna go more on just the game, because I hate to say it, but it's the first Final Fantasy that I've actually fully beat. The first one I ever tried was, like, Zodiac Age, but, no. That's all I'm gonna say on that. But Final Fantasy 7 at least, it deserves being called a landmark JRPG. It's not perfect, and there's a lot of, like, kind of silly things with it. I don't just mean, like, silly moments in the game, because it does have that, but I just mean, like, oh, you want to get to the final area in the game? Go find this one random staff that's hidden at the bottom of the ocean that you got no idea where the hell it is. Good luck. You know, dumb bullshit like that.
Yeah.
But its storytelling, while being a little flawed, is so well done for the time. And so well done now, too, because people can only try to replicate some of the shit they pulled off of Final Fantasy VII and Cloud's character. Its characters are so compelling, its cast is amazing, its overarching narrative is so engaging that it's just a must-play JRPG in my opinion. It wouldn't be the one I first recommend, because it is a little outdated here and there. but for any like die-hard JRPG fan, Final Fantasy VII is definitely a must-play.
I'm really happy that you say that because I remember like me recommending this game to you like for a while now. So you saying that like really like makes me happy because I love this game a
Yeah.
fucking lot.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's always been one that's been on my radar, but because of some of the annoying old things like, random encounters with semi-high spawn rates in some areas, because honestly the spawn rates weren't too bad. Then, sometimes having to grind here and there. Well, actually, I didn't
Yeah.
grind too much either. Just what I thought I would have to do. That's why I put it off for a while, but once you actually get into the game, it can have a couple of ups and downs, but the overall experience is just amazing.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I guess I'll start with my concluding points. I think Final Fantasy VII deserves all the praise that it gets. And it was my first Final Fantasy that I finished as well. Because, like Brewer, I started another one, which was 15, which also no. That game is extremely fucking flawed. Jesus Christ.
Is that the online one?
No, that's 14. 14's the good one.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Oh, you're good.
Oh, are
But,
you talking about the one with the dude that's in Tekken?
Yes, Noctis.
Yeah, Noctis. There we go.
Yeah, 4 dudes riding a car simulator, yes.
Oh yeah, I love riding a car.
But I do think it deserves all that praise. This Final Fantasy VII deserves all the praise that it gets. For it's a game that not only like set a precedent for what storytelling could be at the time. It seems like we're getting a fucking video game that sets like a new precedent for something every week now, but essentially like it was pretty big for the time. It's not only graphically but like technologically and what it did for gaming with the PlayStation technology that Square Enix was able to utilize at the time. The impact of the game is something that we're still feeling today that I don't think another JRPG like has really done.
Its
I mean, obviously that
story,
is
especially with the twist with like Cloud's character as a whole, and then also a villain as iconic as Sephiroth, it's hard for any other game to replicate that.
yeah, it's something that like especially for a gamer its time, like it's so ambitious and it went really hard on everything for a game that came out in the 90s. You wouldn't expect it to be something that holds up as well as something compared to like a JRPG nowadays. But the fact of the matter is that it just works. Like I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to say too much without spoiling it, but the I think it's a game that everyone should play, and I do wish that they remade it. And I gotta call Square
Well,
Enix out on
remade it
this one.
properly.
Yes, remake properly. And I gotta call out Square Enix on this one. They should not have made this singular game a series. Like there's many spin-offs of Final Fantasy VII. There are mobile games. There's a third-person shooter for some reason.
Wait, there's a third-person shooter?
Yes, Dirge of Cerberus. It stars Vincent.
Dude, that's wild.
Considering too, I know about like the rhythm game one. I think that's like a bunch of Final Fantasies.
Either way, there's a lot of spin-offs and a lot of them feature Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah. But point that I'm trying to make is that I don't think it should have been a series. It kind of tarnishes it a little bit, and I think because of that tarnishment, we also find some characters like being misrepresented. Like people say like Sephiroth is cool and whatnot, but they don't say that for the reasons like that the game presents. You know what I mean? Like they like him because he looks cool. He has a long sword. He has a cool transformation as the final boss. But they never mention like the less is more aspect or like the intimidation factor of him. You know what I mean?
I think like on the outside, like the iconic moments he had, like you beating his ass with Omni Slash at the end, or him stabbing your girlfriend. Well, maybe just friend if you're a Tifa fan. I'm a Tifa fan. But I think those moments are what people just see of him at a shell, but they also don't see like the way they meticulously crafted him as a character throughout the game.
Oh, for sure. They definitely did not do that, especially in Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm sorry, but he's just an overused character in that game. Like, I do think that 7 Remake is a good game. I just don't think it holds a comparison to the original. I'm gonna be for real.
The main antagonist of Final Fantasy VII all along is Tetsuya Nomura's writing.
True. What happens if you make an What happens if you make an artist a director of a very, very high budget AAA game? You get Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah,
Oh
I
god.
don't get
But I think
why
that's gonna.
such an iconic game was like they wanted to make it something just different for a remake, especially story wise, because story was never the game's problem.
It's crazy too, because like they're redoing the entire story, at least for like Rebirth and the game to come afterwards, which makes no sense because one of the biggest like things about Final Fantasy VII Original was its story and how landmark it was.
Yeah, now they want to add all these other things to it, like fucking the Ever Crisis mobile game is showing like young Sephiroth off and a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
dude, we did not need that. We didn't need it.
Crisis Core was fine because like Zack is a cool character, but the rest of it is like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think we're making too many Final Fantasy VII series defenders angry. So I think that's a good stopping point for today.
Or 7 remake defenders, I guess.
Yeah, like Jesus
To put it
Christ,
out there,
dude.
it is definitely not like the worst game out there.
No,
Because
it's
you
not.
can do
It's not
you
even
can
a
do a lot
bad
worse.
game. It's actually a pretty like well designed game. Like all things considered, it's just not a Final Fantasy VII game. I would say that's great. It's good, not great.
I think it just doesn't live up to the same moments the original does. Then there was too many aspects of it that they just changed without good reason. Like
For
I
sure.
hate it so much that they made it like the action combat. Like that's fine for a new series or a new game in a series, but like why when the original has like this nice system, like the materia system we talked about for like 20 minutes, and then all the other fun aspects of the combat, why would you change that to such a drastic degree to be completely different just to appease people that be like, no, turn-based combat sucks? Or to appease that one guy on Twitter that was wanting Baldur's Gate 3 to have an action mode.
Wait, was that a real thing?
Yes, that's a real thing. I mean, it's Twitter.
Like,
There's a lot of real things.
that's a. The, it's a D&D game. It's gonna be fucking turn based.
Yeah, some people can understand that.
Jesus Christ. I think that's a great place to stop for today. Oh my god. I love Final Fantasy VII, but I think this is where we're gonna stop it for today. All things considered, please play the game. It's literally on every system and it goes on sale often. It's
Yeah.
like $20 usually, but it usually goes on sale for like $5.
No,
It's so
it's usually
worth.
it's usually $8, but it'll go on sale for cheaper. Or wait, no, it'll be on sale.
Yeah,
It'll be like $12, but be on sale for like 8, I think.
that's worth. That's so worth.
It's so worth. Hell, on Steam, I
But
think
with
it's
that,
like $4 right now.
God, that's crazy. Get it while you can. But with that
Oh
being
man,
said, guys, we've been Fetch Quest, and this has been our episode on Final Fantasy VII Original and as
yeah,
a series.
yeah.
Thank you
Please
very
make sure
much.
to like, subscribe if you want to see more. Comment whether you're a Tifa fan or an Aerith fan. We won't judge.
We won't judge. We like all anime women. We do.
Especially the ones that appear in the Italian Senate.
True. But with that being said, we've been Fetch Quest. Thank you guys very much. See you later.
Bye, everyone.